Te ne sei accorto, sì, che parti per scalare le montagne e poi ti fermi al primo ristorante e non ci pensi più. Te ne sei accorto, sì, che tutto questo rischio calcolato toglie il sapore pure al cioccolato e non ti basta più. Ma l'hai capito che non serve a niente sembrare intelligente agli occhi della gente e che il dolore serve proprio come serve la felicità. Te ne sei accorto, sì, che passi tutto il giorno a disegnare quella barchetta ferma in mezzo al mare e non ti butti mai. Te ne sei accorto, no, che non c'è più le palle per rischiare di diventare quello che ti pare e non ci credi più. Oh, oh, ma l'hai capito che non serve a niente sembrare intelligente agli occhi della gente e che morire serve anche a rinascere. La verità è che ti fa paura l'idea di scomparire, l'idea che tutto quello a cui ti aggrappi prima o poi dovrà finire. La verità è che non vuoi cambiare, che non sai rinunciare a quelle 4-5 cose a cui non credi neanche più. Oh, oh. La verità è che ti fa paura l'idea di scomparire, tutto quello a cui ti aggrappi prima o poi dovrà morire. La verità è che non vuoi cambiare, che non sai rinunciare a quelle 4-5 cose a cui non credi neanche più. Grazie. Sì, il primo pezzo era un pezzo di Jack Savoretti che si intitolava Changes, mentre il secondo pezzo è un pezzo di Bruno Risas che si intitola La Verità.
Grazie. Buonasera a tutti cari amici, mi scuso per la situazione delle
Good evening, dear friends. I apologize for the lighting of this meeting, but the light that we normally use to do live broadcasts mysteriously disappeared. So I ask for your patience if we do not have an ideal lighting for this meeting.
Come incontro di Natale vorrei...
During this Christmas meeting, I would like to read 2 simple lines from the Gospel. And then, in the second part, I invite those who are willing to practice a meditation together.
Scusate per il salto della telecamera. Prima vorrei iniziare con
I would like to start with something I always say, even during the meetings around Italy about the esoteric reading of the Gospel.
E cioè credo che sempre più gente
That is, I think that more and more people are discovering and will discover the peace, the presence, the stillness, the deep silence that are beyond the mind, and that we don't find when we try to quiet the mind and the thoughts.
di calmare i pensieri. C'è Ulisse che vuole
Sorry, Ulysses wants to move somewhere.
parte, scusate. Scusate. Non un silenzio e una quiete che
We are not talking about the silence and stillness that come when we try to fight against the thoughts and shut them up,
pensieri e
but when we begin to sense that thoughts and emotions are not who we are. Well, if this peace, this stillness is discovered by more and more people, perhaps what I am saying may sound a little strong. This means that more and more people will simply spontaneously discover God,
scopriranno
the reality beyond thoughts, beyond philosophies, beyond theological structures, beyond what we believe.
oltre ciò che credo. Ebbene, ma credo che questo passaggio
I believe, though, that the shift from a religion that for centuries has given importance to doctrines, mental, theological, and philosophical structures,
ha
to a peace that is beyond thought, will happen, dear friends, peacefully.
infatti
In fact, it will happen because of those who have discovered such a peace, not those who believe plenty of nice assumptions about this peace.
nuova coscienza.
The bearers of the new consciousness are those who even vaguely really touched God, and not those who believe a lot of things about God and are deeply convinced of something.
Ed ecco perché questo passaggio
As this shift will happen precisely because of those people who have already made, allow me the term, the transition beyond thoughts and emotions.
oltre le emozioni,
Therefore, having discovered the tranquility beyond thoughts,
oltre pensieri,
they themselves, by their presence in the world, will allow the transition to be solely peaceful.
magari senza saperlo, che sono parte dei portatori.
Many of you who are following this meeting, perhaps without knowing it, you belong to the bearers of the new consciousness. So, when I read the sutras of the Buddha, or when I offer a reading from the Gospel, I never try to convince you to become Buddhists or Christians, although I deeply respect Buddhists and Christians. However, I believe, as you always hear me repeat, and as I often say at the meetings, that all doctrines are meant to be peacefully overcome.
L'altro giorno ero in un bar dove vado di solito.
The other day I was in a cafe I regularly visit, and the lady who recognized me from the videos approached me and felt an urge to tell me something that made me laugh.
Poi mi ha fatto ridere, ma voglio raccontarvela. Era
The lady spoke with a strong Roman accent, and she said, PG, the Buddha, Jesus, Lao Tzu were all great communists.
grandi comunisti, no?
This made me laugh a lot, because, you see, when a religion insists too much on making you believe something, it is not very far from ideology.
Invece la nuova coscienza è portata
Whereas the new consciousness is supported by all those who, going beyond the mind, go also beyond an ideology.
e quindi un po' ridendo spiegava
So, half laughing, I explained to the woman that sometimes you are victims of an ideology, even when it is for us the most beautiful. In this case, the communist ideology was very attractive to that person.
voglio parlare di
I
politica.
respect that. I don't want to talk about politics now. However, I believe that when all ideologies are enlightened by something that is beyond the mind, they become good, they serve mankind.
Le loro radici
On the contrary, when they are rooted in the mind and not beyond the mind, they destroy mankind.
mi avete spesso sentito parlare, ne parla tanto Tiziano
You
Terzani.
have often heard me talk about Pol Pot. The writer Tiziano Terzani talks a lot about him.
Cambodia, come si dice.
Pol Pot was the horrific dictator of Cambodia, who set himself the goal of restoring the spiritual mystical splendors of the ancient Khmer, the ancient warriors of the Buddha.
E aggiunse la parola rossi, i Khmer rossi.
To the name he added the word
Era sinceramente
rouge,
attirato
red.
dagli insegnamenti
He called them Khmer Rouge.
completamente.
Pol Pot was sincerely attracted by the Buddha's teachings, but he completely misunderstood them. Do you know why? Because he interpreted them through the mind. He had never even vaguely touched the being beyond forms, which shines in us through the spiritual teaching of a master.
Questi gli insegnamenti del Buddha che
Pol Pot took the teachings of the Buddha, who encouraged to go beyond the mind, and jailed or even shot all the intellectuals.
disse che gli intellettuali avrebbero fatto il male.
He said that the intellectual class would do evil to the people, But he completely misunderstood the Buddha, who had said that trusting the mind and the ideologies creates evil in the people and brings suffering to the world. Pol Pot took a very profound teaching and turned it into an ideology. Thus, he became a monstrous dictator. I've already talked about it, so I won't insist. I rather invite you to investigate it by yourself. Tiziano Terzani talks a lot about it, but you can find other sources as well. Our Tesla also mentioned it once. So, why am I talking about it now? Because I believe, dear friends, that in the coming years we will discover to a greater extent a liberation from any ideal, while respecting all ideals, including religious ideologies.
Se per qualcuno Buddha, Gesù sono stati dei
If someone believes that the Buddha and Jesus were great communists, I want to point out the fundamental difference between Jesus and Mao Zedong, or between Buddha and Hitler, regardless of whether they are right or left-wing dictators. The great masters never insisted, never forced anyone to adhere to a certain creed.
non hanno mai voluto far vestire tutte le persone.
They never wanted to make all people dress alike, do the same job, make them all belong to the same, allow me the term, party.
Perché la rivoluzione che questi veri rivoluzionari hanno portato.
That is why the revolution that these true revolutionaries brought about is bound to last much longer than any ideological revolution, because their teachings come through thought, but they do not come from thought.
Oltre qualsiasi struttura mentale.
They come from a reality that is beyond any mental construct, beyond any belief, beyond any philosophy.
A sfiorare questo, cari amici, noi stessi siamo i portatori.
When we begin to touch upon this understanding, dear friends, we ourselves are the bearers of a tremendous change on earth, simply by what we emanate.
Che abbiamo subito.
We have been brainwashed, conditioned, and I have been too, because, as I often recount, as a boy, I have been in India and I used to see in the teachings of Jesus a kind of catechism that I didn't like very much personally.
Il grande Ballester a farmi vedere che in realtà nelle parole di
Later it was the great Father Ballester who showed me that, actually, in Jesus' words, there was no intention to make us adhere to a creed, but rather to make us discover the God within us. Here is the big difference between the old and the new consciousness. In the old consciousness, religious people follow a doctrine, and this doctrine almost never makes them truly happy, free, loving. Rather, it makes them rigid, and sometimes even violent. Think about religious wars and similar. In the new consciousness, religious teachings are simply means of discovering that, which Christians call God, Buddhists call enlightenment, peace beyond thoughts, Hindus call the self that we truly are. You can use whatever expression you prefer, but please, even though our invitation is to go beyond the mind, try to get a mental image of it as well. More and more people are sensing something that is beyond thought, and they are not against any thought. They are simply realizing that peace and deep silence coming from beyond thought cannot adhere to and cannot be the legacy of a certain ideology. I believe that in the future religious doctrines will still be respected but no longer so much followed. I also believe that the great masters, of whom perhaps the greatest is the one we celebrate in Christmas, because I want to remind you that Christmas is not only panettone, presents and dinners with friends, even if we respect all this, but in truth, it is the celebration of one of the greatest masters that ever appeared on earth. Well, what do you think? Were these great masters ever really interested in making us adhere to a certain doctrine? Or were they rather interested in making us discover God, peace, freedom, nirvana, you name it? Did such great masters really attach any importance to us becoming their followers? In the esoteric Christianity, there is a word, or rather two, used a lot and perhaps little understood. Little understood and rather misunderstood. Christ consciousness. In the Rosicrucian esotericism, for example, and in other esotericisms that some of you know, the term Christic consciousness indicates the state of consciousness that shines in every woman and in every man, which Jesus first discovered.
Lo stesso vale in Oriente per il Buddha.
The same is true in the Orient. When we talk of Buddha, the word Buddha means the one who has awakened. It's not someone, it's not a surname. So for many Christians it seems that Jesus Christ indicates a name and a surname, as if I called Paolo Rossi, for example, or Marta Bianchi. Jesus Christ. Nonetheless, I think many more people in the future will be destined to hear the call to this Christ consciousness, and not so much to who Jesus Christ was historically as to who we are today. I often tell this story because as a boy I was fascinated by Jesus in India, by Jesus the Essene, etc. And it was Father Ballester who told me this thing, among other things, touching my heart with his fingers very gently. He told me that it's not so much about discovering who Jesus was as who I am, who we are. With this, he brought me directly, drastically, to the teaching of the beloved Ramana Maharshi. Here and with this, simply, it will seem trivial to you. Who is a good Christian? A good Christian is a person who discovers God. He is a person who discovers the Christ consciousness within himself, the peace beyond thought, that stillness that cannot be explained, that does not belong to this world. Or I may believe that a good Christian is a person who knows the gospel by heart, who goes to Mass every day. What do you think? And I could ask myself the same question. Who is a good Buddhist? Who is a good Hindu? You see, this question has so drastically, I use this word, to dramatically different answers, depending on whether you are focused more towards the old consciousness or the new. If you talk to an elderly person, for example, although there are many elderly people who are enlightened, but perhaps an elderly person who's a little more attached to old ideas, and you ask him who is a good Christian, he will probably think that a good Christian is a person who follows a certain belief. If you ask an elderly person in India who is a good Hindu or a good Buddhist, even if using different words, he will essentially tell you the same thing. A person who follows a certain church, a certain teaching, a certain belief, a certain philosophy, a certain theology, certain teachings in certain people. In my opinion, in the new consciousness, a good Christian is the one who, through the words of a man who has discovered the Christ consciousness in himself, guides us to discover God within us. This could mean, dear friends, that a good Christian can be a person who does not adhere to Christian belief, just as a good Christian can be a person who, through the Christian belief, discovers God beyond any belief. Therefore, without giving too much importance to what this PG says, I would simply like to ask you, what do you really feel the meaning of Christmas is? Who do you think, since Christmas celebrates one of the greatest teachers ever to come on earth, who do you think a really good Christian is? Look at this picture now, and thank you, Jack, for preparing it.
La leggo.
I read it. Look how beautiful these children's images are. I also thank Legolas for preparing it. Let's read it together. If you are driving, stop for a moment. Do not look at the screen if you are driving. More and more people will understand that happiness is not individual. It's not something you have or don't have, but a state of consciousness of which you are a part, that you either expand or not. Look how beautiful these children are. Notice how beautifully they are playing. You can see them jumping around, girls and boys of all colors. Why do I like this slide so much? I really like it, dear friends, because I believe that people who have discovered God are people that, instead of insisting and also giving great teachings to others, are simply happier people than others. And as very happy people, they help with their presence to lighten the hearts of others. and help others to be happier.
Bene, ma in quella slide c'è scritto che io
In that slide, it is written that I discovered that joy is not something individual.
che ho
It is not something that I have or not, like a pair of shoes or a pen in the pockets or a visiting card in my pocket
un maglione
or a sweater that I wear.
si tratta
It is about something that I am or that I am not.
sono
Or better,
non sono
something that I am and that I have discovered to be or that I have not discovered yet, so I still believe it to be an individual.
guardate
Please watch this extract from a movie,
e
and I asked Tesla to change the angle as usual.
non stare fisso da una parte. Cioè, lo puoi pure lasciare aperto il computer, non è che ogni volta lo devi. Allora, vi ricordiamo,
We remind you if you are watching the pre-recorded video, we'll probably have to remove the original video that you can find in the description below, and we also remind you that we film it from afar for copyright reasons.
ma il microfono. Quando mi dicevi?
Non si sente. Mi siedo. Ok. Amici, questo
Dear friends,
pezzetto di film che abbiamo
this movie part we have watched,
è
a long
proprio
one in
esatto,
fact,
possiamo dire
is the
il
downside of what PG has just told us.
non una felicità,
Thus, not a happiness that we emanate,
ma una lista di cose
but a list of things that we have, a list of goals to reach,
oltretutto ho spiegato molto
and by the way, with a good explanation of how to reach them.
e la cosa che mi colpisce di
So this is what struck me of this brief sequence. The actor is Ben Affleck.
che c'è una grande attenzione,
There's a great attention from the people who are sitting at the table,
un'attenzione
an attention deriving from the fact
c'è la risposta
that there is a precise answer to what happiness seems to be about for all those people.
successo sul lavoro,
Working success, obtaining certain material objects,
veramente oggetto
clearly luxurious and important objects, but mostly a clear and defined path with the objective to even reach the sky.
Ecco, questo pezzetto di film
This sequence represents that kind of attention that people have when happiness
nel momento
is described in details.
la felicità viene descritta per filo e per segno, tutti gli obiettivi individuali,
Goals are clear,
quindi quando
and in a nutshell, happiness is a name that we can reach through a series of objectives.
grazie a tutti amici.
Thank you, my friends.
Grazie Jack. Allora, in questo film, non so se c'è
So in this movie,
no,
I'm not sure if there is enough light though. Are we in the dark?
dopo mi sposto. Scusate per la mancanza.
Okay, sorry for the
Come
inconvenience.
ha detto
As Jack said,
collegarmi
I would like to link what I am going to say to the fact that we could see in it all kinds of convictions.
Qual è la cosa particolarissima della
So what does characterize the new consciousness, my friends?
svegliano al
Those who awaken to our deepest self, to our true self,
non mai
are never doing it through a hypnosis, a conviction, or firm belief into something.
cosa che gli accade.
Rather, it is something that happens when we begin to see that all of our beliefs are pertaining to the mind and we cease to believe in beliefs.
Parole, no?
It seems like a word pen.
Cadere dei credo,
But centuries ago,
non saremmo stati
we would have not been ready to this fall of our beliefs, since most of the people were at a very low level of consciousness,
ma a livello
not like animals, but literally like beasts.
in pace.
Animals are marvelous creatures that are in peace.
Molto grezzo.
I really mean a consciousness level that was very crude,
Era necessario.
and in that case, believing into something was necessary.
Che se avessi fatto del male,
For example, believing that if I had hurt someone, I would have gone to hell.
sempre detto a
People would begin to realize what Dante had always said,
Dante,
as we usually see it in the various Dante circles, that hell is something we create, and it is not a reality existing on its own. Well, but to see that hell does not exist We somehow have to be mature enough. In fact, if people are very rough, they would likely even be violent. So convincing them that if they hurt others, this would cause them to go to hell, it would even help the world not to become a real hell. I'm not sure that you're following me. This belief was necessary in dark times. And by dark, I mean when awareness was obscured, a lack of awareness. So, if it was useful once, it becomes an obstacle when we are ready to be aware. So, let the higher teaching that have appeared on earth resonate into yourself, like those in the Gospels or in the Sutras, in the Bhagavad Gita, in the words of Ramana Maharshi. People have to be ready for them in order to be free from beliefs, or the risk is to substitute an old belief for a new one, which means it will only pertain to the mind sphere, and it won't be possible to discover God beyond the mind. So it is important to start to realize the Christ consciousness that shines in every woman and man. Tony De Mello used to say, and we will see it today in the Gospel, that Jesus was at ease with prostitutes and thieves because he knew that he did not have anything more than them. Something dangerous to state, considering that the Italian Bishops' Conference publicly discouraged the reading of some of De Mello's books. Nevertheless, I think that what he said is very powerful and true. The fact that the Christ consciousness that shines in us does not shine more in a Buddha or Jesus. Rather, these people have simply discovered it more than us. I repeat it, in the new consciousness, the teaching of all great masters, among them Jesus, who is celebrated on Christmas, is intended to discover who we really are beyond personality, beyond personal growth, or our psychological dimension, in order to discover the God in ourselves. It is not adhering to a certain belief or following a guru. For this reason, I'd like to read I'd like to read these few but powerful words that I think all of us know, and I want to invite you to let them resonate inside you, because these are really untamed words, and they can really change the world when we are ready to let them resonate inside ourselves beyond the meaning of these words. Matthew 9 and something. Sorry, I do not cite every word. You know, some people tell me you are a sinner because you don't remember these things. But dear friends, it is not that important to remember everything by heart. As Jesus went on from there, he saw a man named Matthew sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, he told him. And Matthew got up and followed him. The first thing that I want to point out is that Matthew seems silly to us. Somebody with long hair comes, dressed in an odd way, possibly all in white like the essence, and only says two words, follow me. One might think that Matthew is not lucid. My friends, we live in a world that is less simple than the past. The people living 2,000 years ago were less mental than us today. But the first thing that I want you to notice is that in this part of the Gospel, we witness a miracle even without any physical healing. In my opinion, the miracle is not only performed by Jesus, but also by Matthew. And what is this miracle? It is that immediately Matthew recognized reality beyond his little personal accounting table. Please notice that Matthew, who is described as a tax collector, a quite mental person and a knowledgeable one, in that period knowing how to read or to do math required a knowledge that the majority did not have. Notice that Matthew is capable of seeing. I do not imagine Matthew as I imagine a radius man with bright eyes and who is somehow imagine Jesus' aura. I'm not sure we can vaguely imagine the kind of energy and light he expanded. But imagine Matthew feeling someone who looks at him, and even before Jesus tells him something, he raises his eyes, and before hearing anything, he can see a human being that he has never seen before. The way Jesus moves, or the way his eyes shine, the way he looks, that is different from the others that are lost and hypnotized by doing. Jesus says, "Follow me," and Matthew gets up and goes with him. Gospel states, he got up and followed him. He got up, as if we were talking of a person lying down, even dead. Jack has cut out this image. Look at it. We're not going to show you the whole painting of Caravaggio, otherwise we would have to talk for 6 hours, and I would like to keep this meeting not too long. We don't want to bore you too much. Jack cut out this detail from the Caravaggio painting. This is a detail from Caravaggio's The Calling of St. Matthew. Mind you, for some, Matthew is this one. For others, it is another one in the painting. And for others, and I agree with them, it is not one in particular, but it is a little bit of everyone. And in fact, Caravaggio renders the pictures in a way that the Matthew who is called is all of us. It is a beautiful thing. But I would like to show you this detail. A young man, almost a little boy, who is bent over his accounts. Sorry for the poor light, perhaps we can increase the brightness. Caravaggio's paintings are famous for being dark. A young man hunched over his accounts, like who, dear friends? As we are often. Notice, by the way, that the peculiarity of so many of Caravaggio's paintings is that he dressed the characters as the people of his time, as people dressed in his present time. Caravaggio knew that we would see his paintings centuries later, and he dresses the characters of the Gospel in the clothes of his time, as if to remind us that truth is always in the present. In our day, he would dress them as we are dressed today. That person, who is not necessarily Matthew, but is one of the various aspects of Matthew, would be more than one person. He's dressed well. He's dressed nobly, in satin, in silk. He wears a noble waistcoat and breeches. He's very clean, combed, and shaped, which is not a given. He represents a refined person. And in fact, to be so lost in thought, you have to have a certain refined mind. In fact, very simple people with a rather coarse mind have an easier time not getting lost in thought. But that is, in a way, the sacred challenge. So the first image that I invite you to visualize, and I will also invite you to meditate upon afterward in the Christmas meditation that we want to offer for those who are willing to participate, is, does it ring a bell? Am I ever hunched over my itsy-bitsy accounts, as Il Marchese del Grillo would say in a famous Italian movie? This person is so bent over his itsy-bitsy accounts that the Jesus Caravaggio painted down here cannot be seen. Yet the light falling on Matthew comes from a hand aligned with the finger of Jesus. Now, I don't want to get too much into the details of the painting, but while this light invades him, this person is still busy doing his little calculations. What are your itsy-bitsy accounts? And do you know what one of the manifestations of our itsy-bitsy accounts is? It is, I do this in order to get that. Jesus also says it in another way, but when you do alms, let not your left hand know what your right hand does. And today we will delve into this. But first I want to go back to this beautiful image. A man who appears insane to our eyes feels something that does not belong to this world. This man must have immediately recognized something very important, to leave all the insignificant accounts behind, to drop all his resolutions. I do this, to relinquish all his setting aside like an ant, to follow the beyond.
insegnò a meditare
Well, Father Ballester many years ago taught me to meditate on the Gospel by reading it as if it showed different sides of us. So let us not see Matthew as a person who may or may not have existed 2000 years ago. It is not important, but let us see him as one side of us. What in Matthew does recognize the God in Jesus?
in Gesù.
That is, can the eager recognize God?
Riconoscere Dio. Ne parlavamo anche negli incontri.
We also talked about this during our meetings in the theaters when St. John the Baptist recognized Jesus.
Per sentire
To hear the call of God,
la chiamata
the call of the beyond,
l'Eterno,
of the eternal that tells you that life is not all here, Matthew must have had God in him
se
too.
Matteo fosse solo una personalità,
If Matthew were only a personality, an ego, a psychological dimension without the divine within,
come potrebbe
deep inside,
il divino, la
how could he recognize the call of the divine from the outside if he did not have the divine within him?
cosa in noi ci fa
Well, dear friends,
chiamata
what in us makes us hear the call to something that is beyond our itsy-bitsy accounts, if not the God within us?
può essere anche esteriore, può venire anche a
This call may also come from the outside. It may come through a master who lived 2000 years ago and whom we celebrate at Christmas.
conoscere, da cui
But it is important to recognize that I can hear this call simply because deep inside me there is God.
lo stesso c'è Dio ed è il Dio in me. Permettetemi il gioco di parole che riconosce
And it is the God within me, let me use a wordplay, who recognizes the call of the God outside me.
fuori e dentro. Ma
Of course, there are not two gods. It is one God beyond the division of outside and inside. But in the beginning, I have to see this.
sulle proprie
So it is a very powerful miracle that Matthew punched over his own little things, that who knows how big they may have seemed to him, recognizes the call. Caravaggio depicts him as hunchbacked, although in reality he is not old, he is a young, healthy man. In the same way, we ourselves, as we are hunched over our own little things, our trivial things of the personality, no matter how big they may seem to us, they are always small compared to God's call. I can sense that life is something other than just paying a mortgage, raising children, finding a good job, or seeking a little bit of joy and pleasures, only because God is already within me.
Padre nostro,
To put it like the Master of all Masters, who is celebrated at Christmas, our Father.
vero?
That means He is the Father of all of us and not just Jesus.
Prima cosa. Matteo che quasi in bambino
Matthew looks like numb,
è il contrario.
but in reality it is the opposite.
Grazie
He
a
wakes up to reality by just hearing those two words, follow me.
chi riconosce quella chiamata che non è
And who recognizes that call that comes neither from someone who wants to beat him up,
tasse.
because Matthew is a tax collector, so it could have been someone saying, "Ah, you are the one who made me pay all those taxes to the Romans. Come here, follow me around the corner." It could have been something like that, right? And it wasn't either the call of a dummy saying, "Come on, follow me, I'll show you what life is all about," a kind of Carlo Verdone and his sword of fire.
Chiamata su
Matthew recognizes the supreme call.
chiedo. Questa chiamata
I wonder, did this call cease 2000 years ago?
o è costantemente viva
Or is it constantly alive in the God of the living,
per usare il linguaggio cristiano?
to use a Christian
Questa
language?
chiamata c'è in ognuno di
Is it possible that this call still exists within each of us?
Prima di andare avanti ai nostri musici
Before moving on, I ask our musicians if they would like to play another song.
grazie, ricordatevi del microfono sul microfono.
Just sitting at the bar, an American coffee and a beating heart. Hear people complaining, I judge them always, but I do the same. And when I look into your eyes, I see the me that I don't wanna see. And it's tough to admit we're of diamond covered of cream. In my mind, I make it right, but the pain is still inside. And when I'm tired of this stupid fight, I realize I don't need to lie. Run, scream. Oh, this anger is begging to me to see I'm not better as I think when I look into your eyes. I see the me that I don't wanna see, and it's tough to admit I didn't choose to be me. In my mind, I make it right, but the pain is still inside. And when I'm tired of this stupid fight, I realize I don't need to lie. In my mind, I make it right. And more I try, and more I lie. And when I'm tired of this stupid fight, I realize I never needed to lie. Grazie. E questo era un pezzo che abbiamo scritto io e
This is a song that me and Dante wrote together,
I Don't Need to Lie.
and the title is I Don't Need to Lie.
Grazie.
Grazie. Oh, l'hanno scritto Dante e Dario questo pezzo, non so se vi rendete conto che
I
bravi.
don't know if you realize how good they are, but Dante and Dario wrote this song themselves. This is such a beautiful form of creativity.
Allora, stiamo interiorizzando. Ciao Super Cuccio. Scusate, quando c'è il video sono tutti un po'. Stiamo interiorizzando questo bellissimo aspetto del
So we are internalizing this beautiful passage of the gospel where this miracle definitely happens through Jesus, but also through Matthew, who is able to see.
Leggendo i libri della teosofia,
I remember when I was a kid, I used to read esoteric theosophy books, where it was written that all the people around Jesus, including even Mary Magdalene, were not just prostitutes, fishermen, or carpenters. They may have been these in that lifetime, but they had been great masters in other lives. Now, it's not relevant to believe this, but I want to point out the fact that Matthew immediately follows this call and has the ability to really see.
Many people say, I want to meditate, I want to surrender, I want to be at peace. But then they are full of armors, they are full of fears, they are full of defenses that they hold up. You will remember that line from A Course in Miracles that says that everything that needs to be protected is not real. The Gospel here presents Matthew as a publican, bent over his trivial itsy-bitsy calculations. But he must not have had much armor, to recognize that call immediately
Quindi
and follow
è
it.
una forma di autoconoscenza.
So I repeat as a form of self-inquiry
Cosa è particolarmente
about what the Matthew in me is particularly drawn to.
cosa io, diciamo, che cosa
What hypnotizes my consciousness the most
personalità?
and keeps it in the personal history?
Basta riconoscerlo, basta vederlo questo.
Because you see, you just need to acknowledge it, to see
Dal
it.
proprio piccolo banco, perché Matteo è
It is
ipnotizzato.
not a question of not being hypnotized by one's own little booth, because Matthew is hypnotized by his little things. But while he is hypnotized, hunchbacked of his little things, he is capable of listening. He is capable of recognizing that call.
È necessario essere già persone
I believe, dear friends, that to recognize the call to the eternal in us, it is not necessary to already be extraordinary people, but it is necessary to be able to observe these dynamics in us,
lo ripeto ancora.
the small booth in which I spend my whole life.
Qual è quel piccolo?
So I say it again. Does it ring a bell about this?
Stiamo dicendo che sia sbagliato.
What's that little booth I'm hunchbacked over? We are not saying it's wrong, we're just hinting to see it. Speaking of seeing, we show you another piece of a movie which is beautiful, San Francesco by Zeffirelli, again from afar, and sorry if we show it from afar. Jack, do you want to introduce it for a moment? Sit there.
Allora, avrete capito che Zeffirelli ci piace molto.
Well, I guess you have understood that we like Zeffirelli a lot.
Gesù di
And I must say that in these two movies, Jesus of Nazareth and Brother Sun, Sister Moon, he has the power to show very profound teachings with great refinement. Now, in this excerpt of the movie, we see St. Clair, who joins Francis in a field, and essentially, we could say that she declares herself, that is, she opens up to her vocation.
Però il film mostra, e vi invitiamo
But the movie
a vedere,
shows, and we invite you to see it, how Claire approaches Francis.
lo incontra prima che
She meets him before he becomes Saint Francis, before he even goes to war.
e lei
He's a rich, handsome young man, and she is clearly touched by him, but it becomes clear throughout the film that she is moved not by his charm, she is touched by something else.
nel pieno della crisi e ha
And she is so touched that when she meets him again, she has a different fascination, she is intrigued.
e gli
And
offre
then again, she meets him when he starts to preach and offers him a loaf of bread in the rain, up to the moment that we are going to see in the movie, where her diffidence dissolves and Claire goes to Francis and speaks to him.
Prendo il video. Vi invito a vedere questo pezzetto, è molto breve.
I invite you to see this little excerpt. It is very short, but the delicacy that the director was able to capture it is so beautiful,
Ma non è tra le
because there is a love story between the two, but it is not between two persons, but it is the enlightenment of them both.
È
And I must say, the choice of actors is also very
San
inspired.
Francesco e Michel Bosè, per chi non lo sapesse. Un giovanissimo Michel Bosè.
Francesco,
Chiara, ascoltami, io ti porto il mio bene, Francesco.
Claire, you shouldn't have come, but I knew you would. I have to tell you, I don't care if the whole world knows it.
Ora vedo così
From now on, I want to live as you live. Don't send me away because I'm a woman with little strength or gentle manners. I'm not seeking to be understood anymore. I want to understand. I'm not asking to be loved, I want to love.
Ovunque ci sia dolore, aiuto.
Where there is sadness, please, please, help me find joy. Claire.
Ah, è un pezzo molto breve, ma ripeto, vi invito a vedere il
It is a very short excerpt, but again I invite you to watch the film.
una versione
I think there is a full version right on YouTube, and in this very inspirational movie, I invite you to grasp this love story that is beyond the persons, because the two of them love each other, but love is fueled with something that is beyond both of them. Thank you.
E allora aggiungo a quello che ha detto Jack, in realtà è bellissimo questo fatto
So I add
di
to
questo
what
amore
Jack said,
tra questi
this
due
fact is
ragazzi,
actually
che
beautiful,
si passa
this
da un
love
amore
between
vero,
these two
scelto loro
guys,
due,
isn't it?
diciamo
A
con una
romantic story
minuscola, tra
between the two of
virgolette, per
them,
diventare
let's
un
say a
un
love
amore
with
con la
a
maiuscola,
lowercase
come quel
l
quadro, L'isola
turns
paradisiaca,
into a love with a capital L,
che simboleggia
as the
diciamo,
painting
come
over
questo
the
quadro,
fire there. If you frame
dove
it for a
l'amore
moment, it
vero ti
symbolizes
eleva,
true love, which
non ti
elevates
chiude,
yourself.
ma ti porta in alto.
It doesn't limit you, it uplifts you instead.
È il quadro di Chagall, chiaramente, di Pier Giorgio originale poi.
It is Chagall painting, Pier Giorgio's authentic painting.
Non è vero che è originale, è un falso d'autore bellissimo.
Obviously, it's not the original. It is a beautiful copyright fake made by a very good painter. Please don't come and steal it. Cujo, sit there.
Allora, questa storia forse che vi abbiamo fatto vedere di
So, this story we showed you of St. Francis by Zeffirelli and Claire perhaps seems a bit cheesy, a bit like a romantic film,
ma l'intento, come bene hanno
but the intention, as Jack and Cujo well said,
raccontare una
is
storia
another.
completamente diversa che riguarda invece la
And I want to tell a completely different story about the life of Gautama the Buddha. You can find it in Thich Nhat Hanh's book, Old Path, White Clouds,
e che penso
about the life of Buddha, which is one of the readings we recommend and which helps a lot to have in the clicks.
non è necessario
To read it, you don't have to be a Buddhist, it's not necessary. You can very well be alike, and you may have a different creed, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever it is, and rejoice so much in the life of the Buddha. It is plausible that the India of 2400 years ago, in which Siddhartha lived, was an India divided into many small parts, and each of them had a king, or even in some cases a queen. In case there was no king, there was a queen.
Nel caso non vi fosse il re, c'era comunque una regina. E la terra, si dice nell'India,
And the land in which Siddhartha lived as a boy
però
is said to be northern India near modern Nepal,
da ragazzo,
though it's not historically confirmed, was bordered with a kingdom with which Siddhartha's reign was at peace,
il regno vicino
and therefore Siddhartha's father and the king of the neighboring kingdom were at peace.
Siddhartha. Quando Siddhartha abbandonò tutto,
When Siddhartha gave up everything, and, after many years, people began to say that he had become a great Buddha,
illuminato,
one of the greatest masters, a great enlightened one,
il regno vicino,
the king of the neighboring kingdom said to his friend, Siddhartha's father, "My friend, I'll go there and talk to your son. Let's see if I can bring him to his senses."
ed è una storia bellissima. Si dice essere stato
And it's a beautiful story.
lo possiamo
It's said to have actually happened.
questo re che di
And we can understand that, can't we?
persona va a parlare con
Therefore, this king went in person to talk to a seemingly beggar, a person who is dressed in nothing, a bit like Francis in the movie we just saw.
si dice che il re gli abbia provato a dirgli
It is said that the king told him, or at least tried to tell him,
il tuo
"Please go back to your princehood.
quando
Your kingdom needs a king.
sarà re. E poi
When your father dies, who will be king?
con una
And then, why is a prince acting like a beggar, with a bowl in his hands?
il re si dà
All this now seems like a lot to you," said the king to Siddhartha. "But soon you will understand that you have had a bit of a sleep. Go back to the really important, real, and noble things."
nobile, no? E si dice che Siddhartha sia rimasto in silenzio.
And Siddhartha is said to have remained silent.
Un po' simile
Siddhartha was already the Buddha, and I imagine that silence a bit similar to that of Jesus in front of Pontius Pilate. And the Buddha is said to have told him, "I will follow you if you answer me sincerely."
Siddhartha.
And the king said, "Of course I will answer you sincerely, Siddhartha." Are you really happy?
Io penso che un poveraccio non sia felice, ma sto nel
I think that the poor creature isn't happy, But I'm under the delusion that the king, the richest man of the realm, is happy by having all the palaces. At the epoch, the harem was full of all kinds of women. The king had all kinds of horses. Nowadays, we could say all the cars of the world. But in front of the Buddha's presence, I was saying about Jesus, sorry, in front of the Buddha's presence, that aura, that look, the king couldn't lie.
Che anziché rispondere
And it is said that instead of replying no,
un allievo del Buddha.
he had replied asking to become one of Buddha's
La
disciples.
storia è abbreviata, scusate.
Now, probably the story is abridged,
Credo che sia stata la stessa
but actually, I believe it has been the same thing for each of us feeling a call from the beyond.
che i nostri piccoli conti
And that is, we all realize that our itsy-bitsy accounts or big ones,
di un re,
made on a small or a big
quello
booth,
banchetto o quel branco,
that the world, as much as it could make us rich, it doesn't make us truly happy.
non ci rende
And this recognition implies that both us and the king are extremely aware and intelligent.
Poi io credo che sia molto simile alla chiamata di Matteo o alla chiamata che Jack ci ha fatto.
Then I believe it is very similar to Matthew's call, or to the call that Jack showed us about Claire.
Chiamata che ognuno
But I believe that it's very similar, mostly, dear friends, to the call that each of us receives
ma non se ne accorge
from the behind the forms,
proprio bancone
but that we don't realize because we are stooped to our own little or large booth.
il grande maestro dei
Now, it seems absurd to celebrate the great master of masters through the Buddha at Christmas time, but in my opinion, it isn't at all, because even the Buddha was in the Christ consciousness. Christ consciousness in Buddhism it is called Buddhahood. It's just a different name. But in the new consciousness, we realize that they are all different fingers pointing at the same moon, as in the famous Zen story.
particolare del quadro di Caravaggio.
Good, seeing it from Matthew, maybe from that detail from Caravaggio's painting, or seeing it from Saint Clare, one of the true great mystics of Christianity. Besides, the term clear is also an invitation to clarity, isn't it? Or seeing it through the king's perspective, who invited the Buddha to go back to the true things and himself became a Buddha's disciple, dear friends. I say it again.
Sente questa chiamata
Is there something in me that senses this call?
che normalmente mi fa sentire questa
Do you know what's the typical thing in me? The one that normally allows me to perceive and dread this call. Let's say that allows me to pretend that I don't perceive it.
una vita scema.
The fact that deep down I fear that I'm living a purposeless life.
Agli occhi del
It doesn't matter if I'm a king or a nobody to the eyes of the world. It doesn't matter if I got a mansion, yacht, airplanes. Within me, there is something that says, this life that I'm living, I'm wasting it.
nessuno
I'm missing something else.
darvelo per certo e garantito.
Well, it's a personal opinion, and nobody, least of all me, will want you to take this for granted and guaranteed. But my feeling is that for this reason, Matthew perceives the call.
dietro le tasse.
Matthew
Avesse chiaro dentro
wastes all his life around taxes,
stai sciupando
but I believe that he had something clear within himself that told him, you're wasting your life.
ebrea.
Despite him being one who had a lot of money compared to other Hebrew,
Così carino.
he felt that life was being wasted.
La chiamata
And so, dear friends, we start to perceive the call to a truer life,
in contatto con la realtà.
more royal in the noble sense of the term, of contact with reality and not with a crown on the head, even though the root of the word is the same. The royals become nobles because they touch reality, from which it is said that the royal family, namely the family who would have touched reality,
Chi darebbe il
might have the authority to help others,
verso la
guiding them toward happiness.
Questo era caro anche agli egizi come idea, cioè che il faraone dovesse essere
This idea was dear also to the Egyptians, namely that the pharaoh should be fundamentally enlightened and initiate the higher truths to help others, the people, to be happy and to properly rule over them. Say it again, perhaps it didn't always go this way, but the idea that the royal, the reigning one, is the one who has discovered reality, it's an idea that has roots in the millenary initiatory traditions. We forgot it, but the world is royal, real. Thus the one who has discovered reality. So he or she is eligible to lead and to rule the others. Okay?
che sto sciupando la mia vita.
Now I'll get back to me.
Ed è
Is it possible that I perceive that I'm wasting my life? Is it possible that by feeling that I'm wasting my life, instead of having a hot spot of depression, I have a hot spot of awakening.
È possibile che Matteo, come il Buddha,
Is it possible that Matthew, likewise the king who goes to speak with the Buddha, both already felt that the life they were living, even if outwardly envied by others,
il re,
Matthew sells money, the king obviously being one very rich compared to the others, actually both felt, both had that intelligence, that sense, that awareness to say, there's more in life.
la sto sciupando la
I'm wasting my life.
vivo dietro solo ai miei banchetti o banconi, conticini o conticioni.
If I leave it only around my small or large booth, or around my itsy bitsy or big calculations,
Voglia dire,
will it be wasted?
sentire che
And is it possible, dear friends, that this means being ready?
non scopriamo altro.
Sensing that in some way we are a bit wasting our life if we don't discover something else?
Ne sai qualcosa?
So I dare to say again, does it ring a bell?
L'azione che seguirà, vorrei proprio invitarvi a interiorizzare questo oltre solo le
In
parole.
the meditation that will follow, I would invite you to internalize this beyond just words, in silence.
Hai mai sentito?
But now, even just in your thoughts, does it ring a bell?
Può essere tutta
Have you ever heard something that said to you,
ecco, io sono
this can be all of my life, I'm wasting it?
Matteo fosse in quella fase.
There, I am firmly convinced that Matthew was in that life phase.
Probabilmente riconoscere subito la verità.
And this is why he was unbelievably capable to recognize the truth in Jesus right away.
Prima
And it's the truth in Matthew that acknowledged the truth in Jesus.
avete un altro pezzo?
Before reading one last piece, I ask our musicians, do you have another song?
Vi va?
Yes?
Un ultimo.
Do you fancy?
Dillo che improvvisi.
One last. Just say that you improvise, huh? He thought that I wouldn't ask him for them.
No, stanotte amore non ho più pensato a te. Ho aperto gli occhi per guardare intorno a me e intorno a me girava il mondo come sempre. Gira il mondo, gira nello spazio senza fine, con gli amori appena nati, con gli amori già vissuti, con la gioia e col dolore della gente come me. Oh mondo, soltanto adesso io ti guardo. Nel tuo silenzio io mi perdo e sono niente accanto a te. Il mondo non si è fermato mai un momento. La notte insegue sempre il giorno ed il giorno verrà. Oh mondo, soltanto adesso io ti guardo, nel tuo silenzio io mi perdo e sono niente accanto a te. Il mondo non si è fermato mai un momento. La notte insegue sempre il giorno ed il giorno Grazie. Non credo ci sia bisogno di dirlo, comunque questo era il mondo di Jimmy Fontana.
Grazie a tutti e due. Grazie. Allora, vorrei chiudere, prima di invitarvi, se vorrete, a una...
So I'd like to finish before inviting you to this Christmassy meditation,
tecnici
if you
di chi
want,
sta qui e di chi anche non sta
that
qui.
thanks to all the work of our technicians, of those who are present or not here, that this video will be also available as a recording.
Jack, avevamo anche le slide.
I'd like to finish to internalize 2 words from the Gospel. Jack, did we also have the slides about this part?
E non in qualche modo cercando di...
And we're doing it in lay mode,
semplicemente
and not trying to convince you of a certain creed. I simply remind you that we want to share something that we think facilitates inner clicks.
Vangelo. Qualcosa che mi...
We believe that this is what the Gospel is about, something that allows to have a click within
E
ourselves.
avvenne, essendosi lui seduto a mensa nella casa, lui Gesù, che molti
While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house,
vennero e si
many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his
i
disciples.
farisei dicevano ai suoi discepoli: come mai
When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?"
disse loro: non hanno
On hearing this, Jesus said,
ma gli ammalati.
"It is not the healthy who need a doctor,
E apprendete
but the sick.
intendo.
But go and learn what this means.
Non sacrificio,
I desire mercy,
a chiamare i
not sacrifice,
ma i peccatori.
for I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners."
Vorrei ripetere, cari amici, ancora una volta, per quanto possa sembrare banale, che il Natale è un
I'd like to say once again, dear friends, as far as it might seem banal,
straordinario,
that Christmas is to celebrate the arrival of this extraordinary Master,
credo, tipico
of this extraordinary Master who calls us to the rediscovery of God within us, and not to the adhesion of a creed which we have believed too much in the old consciousness.
per scoprire
I believe that the great masters like Jesus are all masters of the direct path. That is, we don't need any intermediaries in order to discover God.
a parte perché lo trovo meraviglioso, ma la prima cosa è
So I chose this piece of the Gospel, apart because I find it marvelous.
possiamo intuire
But the first thing that I'd like to let you notice, I'm starting to laugh because I believe that it's an energy that we can't perceive. There are these envious people
il vostro
eating their hearts out who do not go directly to Jesus but to his disciples. They say, "Your master eats with sinners."
sempre stata un po'
They don't go up to Jesus, you see.
nella vita
These very people have always been a bit coward. I believe that in life we also know these energies, although these are set on some higher levels, aren't they? For example, when people say to your friends, your pupil, "Listen up, but he is..."
da un lato che
They never come straight to you. Does it ring a bell?
perdona
Both on one side and on the other?
fartele ribollire.
And if you have had these experiences, forgive and let it all go. And don't let them boil up inside you. However, it's likely that you have experienced these envious energies.
Che tutti i grandi maestri, cristiani o no che siano,
The first thing that I want you to notice in this part of the Gospel is that every great teacher, be it Christian or Muslim, never said, "I'm the best, I'm so spiritually elevated, you are the sinners, we are not."
no, sono qui perché
In this part of the Gospel, Jesus says, "I'm here for the sick,
sembra
for
quasi
whoever needs me."
che quei poveretti
And it almost seems that these poor people needed him while the righteous ones didn't.
i peggiori dei quali essendo quelli che si sentono fuori dal peccato.
But actually, here, there are 2 levels of sinners, and the worst ones, those who think they are sinless.
2000 anni fa, che potrebbe
And it would be beautiful if you see it as a side of yourself.
essere come un lato
Whether this 2000 years old fact has had really happened or not, that's not important.
che fanno casino. Immaginate il piccolo io,
First of all, the light sits with your little chaotic selves.
il
Imagine the little jealous self,
programma
the little worrisome self,
si chiamava Ballester nella mia.
the little everything.
Immaginate che Gesù
All these are the little selves, as Ballaster called them in deep meditation and self-knowledge.
peccatori.
Imagine that when the Pharisees arrive, Jesus isn't just standing there and teaching to these sinners. Instead, he just stays with them, eats with them, What does this symbolize you?
Come se quelle persone
It's great because Jesus isn't giving a special teaching.
come sono.
Kind of like if these people or these sides of myself were okay as they already are, and symbolically the light already considers them worthy of being in the light.
Ma
You don't have to improve them mandatorily.
rivolge a quelli che
Who is Jesus speaking to?
sono
He doesn't talk to those who are already in his presence,
fuori e la giudicano.
but to those who aren't and are judging him while speaking with his disciples.
Andiamo,
What do you see in this?
leggiamo un attimo il pezzo, scusatemi.
Let's proceed little by little. Let's read it again.
Per favore, interiorizziamolo, perché interiorizzare queste parole
Please, let's internalize this, because internalizing these words has to do with Christmas as much as gifts, panettone, etc.
Essendosi lui seduto a mensa,
While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house,
volete bene, no?
when do we sit and dine with someone? When we love this person, when we have intimacy.
Anche noi faremo stasera con questi.
To sit and eat with someone, as we are going to do tonight,
Quindi se
it's typical between friends.
lati di me, gabellieri,
So if these sides of myself
notate che
are actually mine,
gli insegnamenti
notice that in the Christian teaching they are completely embraced and accepted as they are by Jesus.
con me va e fa 6 ore di
He doesn't say, you, before dining with me, go and meditate for 6 hours,
tu fai una sana
you repent,
capisci?
you
Tu mi
do a yoga asana,
il quarto chakra prima, poi
you wear this stone and purify your fourth chakra, and then you could sit with me.
già così come sono.
All these sinners are already worthy to sit with Jesus, being as they are.
Su un'ottava più alta. Cosa vuol dire se sono lati di te?
Please bring this to a higher level. What does it mean if these are sides of yourself, these little selves?
Devo dare spunti, ma non spiegare tutto, cari amici, se no si rischia di trasformare tutto in troppo.
Sometimes I think I have to give cues, but I don't have to explain everything, otherwise there's the risk to translate it all in food for the mind. I ask you though not to stop with words, but to go into the essence of what we are trying to convey, which is this all-embracing acceptance of all our sides, even those ones which the little judgmental self sees as sinners.
Discepoli, cioè notate che
Many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. Notice that Jesus is there and these little sinners came afterwards,
presenza, no?
like they were strongly attracted by the light emanating from his presence.
Discepoli, perché non osa
When the Pharisees saw this, they asked his disciples,
mangia con i peccatori.
they stay on the outskirts.
Allora notate in
Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?
di qualcuno che si reputa
First of all, notice the humongous spiritual ego of someone who portrays himself as a non-sinner.
peccatore più grande,
If, for example, we take St. Francis' life, he thought of himself as the greatest sinner,
però si reputava come
and he was the only one who wasn't.
come mai i grandi maestri, i grandi
Why did the Grand Masters of Light never consider themselves higher than anyone else, while the Pharisees did?
farisei vissuti 2000 anni fa, se fosse un lato di te
And what if these weren't Pharisees but a side of yourself?
che si sente nel giusto,
Meaning,
consciamente non si sente
the side of yourself who feels righteous subconsciously feels unworthy of dining with Jesus.
lato di me che giudica anche dei lati di me
Better, the side of myself who judges other sides of myself
alla tavola in cui
is the one who will not sit at the table,
il banchetto è un simbolo.
the table of joy and happiness,
Stai vedendo quanto è bello?
whereas the banquet serves as a symbol for this.
Quello è un peccato.
Can you see how beautiful this is?
Maestro. Quella è un'altra peccato.
So the side which tells that's a sinner, he shouldn't be with the master.
Lato di me.
That's a prostitute, she shouldn't be beside him.
Lo stai vedendo?
That side of myself is the only one who's not with him.
Interiorizzare questo.
Do you see it?
Altrettanto Natale di mangiare panettoni e pandori.
I repeat, seeing this is as much important as eating panettone and unwrapping gifts.
Degno del banchetto, della felicità.
There's a side of myself that thinks it's not worthy of sitting at the table of happiness, the table of God. And it's exactly the side thinking that everyone else isn't worthy of it too.
Tanta questa cosa inizia ad ardere come il fuoco.
And notice that when seeing it, this begins to burn like fire.
I mistici, stai, dai. I grandi mistici parlano di ardore, no?
The great mystics talked about ardor.
Fuori, via, corsa sotto la neve.
This doesn't mean having big muscles or any of that. I want, I can.
come se quando
The other symbolizes a deeper fire,
ardere in voi
almost like if when you see all this heat begins to burn everything that you are not.
altro pezzo. Loro non parlano direttamente a Gesù, ma Gesù li ascolta.
They aren't talking directly with Jesus, but he listens to them anyways.
Furbo, fammi
He
sentire
hears them.
questi. Non è così.
We might think that Jesus was there trying to eavesdrop what they were telling. Of course, that's not the case. The Christ consciousness is open and listens to everything. It welcomes also the judgmental sides.
È bellissimo, è tutto
Everything is being listened to and loved. That's why Jesus hears them, and it's beautiful and highly symbolic, my friends. But when you discover it, it ceases to be a symbol.
anche loro.
On hearing this,
Notate che
because they were also listened to,
parlano ai discepoli. Gesù
Jesus said, "Notice that the envious people eating their hearts out are talking with disciples while Jesus talks to them directly.
è già
He
bellissimo
doesn't come at them through his disciples so that they pass it on to them.
del medico, ma gli ammalati.
It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick."
Scoprire chi veramente siamo.
The Christ consciousness, the understanding of our true nature, who we really are, has an authentic healing effect.
Perché forse più di tutti gli altri
The
insiste
Buddha in the East is called the healer,
risveglia
because more than anyone else, he emphasized that awareness and the discovery of who we really are is the only treatment for any disease.
parlare della stessa cosa.
Here, Jesus seems to speak about the same thing.
Agli ammalati. Ma ci sono due tipi di malati.
Awareness is important for the sick
Una persona che
ones,
va dal medico,
but there are two kinds of sick people:
una persona che si crede
the
sana.
one who goes to a doctor to heal,
Quale dei due farà la
and the
fine?
one who thinks he is healthy. Which one will end up worse?
Una ferita. Cerco di
The
essere
one who is injured and looks for healing,
una
or the one who,
mi accorgo
having been injured,
sano,
thinks he is healthy,
si infetta.
while the wound being neglected will become infected, thus worsening his condition?
Scambio di parole profondissimo. Mi permetto di dire molto più profondo di tante cose
Notice that in this very deep dialogue,
sembrano profonde.
maybe deeper than a lot of complex mental things which seem deep but are not,
Di malattia. Uno, di chi è consapevole di essere
Jesus speaks about two ways of being sick.
è il malato peggiore.
One,
Ed è
being aware of the sickness,
sta bene.
and the other,
Da quello.
thinking that everything is going all right and there's no sickness at all.
E
Does it ring a bell?
prendete ciò che intendo. Mi sembra assurdo.
But go and learn what this
Avete
means.
capito cosa ho detto? Ma
Here Jesus says,
l'avete
you might have understood what I said,
andate,
but it didn't click inside you yet.
cioè fate
You heard it with your ears, but now go and learn it
quello che
practically,
non rimangano solo
meaning
concetti che avete
let this run wild within you, internalize it,
maestro poi a me.
so that what you heard won't just remain at the level of your ears, but learn it in a practical way.
Cioè letteralmente si trasformi nel
Hence, make it a practice,
non solo
literally.
avete ascoltato.
Live by this.
Andate e fate che questo vi faccia click dentro.
Go and let it click inside you.
Misericordia voglio, non sacrificio,
I desire mercy,
perché non sono venuto a chiamare i
not
ma i
sacrifice.
peccatori, perché si pentano.
For I have not come to call the righteous,
Proprio a quelli
but
che
sinners.
erano giusti.
And who is he saying this to?
Questo è bellissimo.
Right to those who thought they were right.
Pentimento
This is beautiful because you will remember that the word repentance
ricordo anche una
also
cosa che ho
means
parlato altre volte.
going
La
home.
parola peccato in greco
And I also remind you of something we have talked about other times, that the word sin in Greek means
Dio che giudica.
an archer who misses the target.
Body will-
Therefore, there is no God who judges. And in Latin, it means body please.
Il latino significa pes captum, cioè piede bloccato, catturato.
In Latin, it means pes
In
captum,
latino e in
namely
quindi
foot blocked or captured.
sono tutte lingue
It is
indoeuropee.
interesting that Greek,
Praticamente
Latin,
hanno la stessa origine.
Indian, Sanskrit
Sono i
are
secoli
all Indo-European languages,
abbiamo
and they all
verificato
have the same origin.
mancare il
And then,
bersaglio,
over the
eccetera.
centuries,
Praticamente
they
era
diverged.
una
And we have
origine
pes
comune,
captum, means the target,
qualche secolo
etc.
in più, perché
But in ancient
sono
times,
tutti
they
secoli.
came from a common origin.
Però appunto sono
We
termini
hardly
diversi
study these
per
anymore because we no longer have
la
references. However, there are different ways that develop from the same starting point.
Approfitto pure per fare complimenti a Bodi che, nonostante il suo super
Thank you,
lavoro
Bodhi.
impegnativo e le sue 1000
I
attività,
also take this opportunity to congratulate Bodhi, who, despite his super demanding job and his 1,000 activities,
è proprio un
is
grande
about to graduate in literature.
e anche
Besides taking a bachelor's degree, he'll follow up with a master's degree. He is a great example for all of us. And also other people here, as adults enrolled in university, Newton, Dante, and others present here, Dario and also Tesla, even Jack and Cujo, even Pat, but she doesn't know yet.
questa cosa
The only one who doesn't sign up is me.
vi ricorderete chi di voi ha partecipato
As those who attended the meeting on Dante's exit from hell will remember, we will have this meeting again in Taormina, in the beautiful Sicily, in February.
nel cogito
This beautiful thing that Bodhi tells us is that Lucifer, in the last count of the Inferno, is in the all-frozen cocytus, as Dante says. His water is frozen by the flapping of Lucifer's bad wings.
in nessuna parte dell'inferno, neanche nella peggiore, neanche col
That is, in no part of hell, not even in the worst, not even with the worst villain,
che si auto
there is a God who chastises and punishes, but there is Lucifer who blocks himself in the eyes.
volo che non è il suo.
He blocks itself through this flapping,
Prende
by which it would like to make a flight that is not his own.
di cui c'è
So Dante takes the etymology of the word sin, stuck, as Bodhidharma told us,
un blocco, ma
and elevates it to even higher levels. It does not speak only of a block, but of a self-block.
ne sai qualcosa?
Usually, when I read this canto of Dante in theaters, I always ask, does it ring a bell? Hence, a sin is something that you block yourself with.
Immaginate queste persone che si autobloccano
Now, let's go back to this part of the Gospel
le loro
and imagine these people who block themselves in their judgments and are eating their hearts out.
di
They
sedere
block themselves to the point that they do not feel worthy to sit at the table with Jesus.
e si sarebbero potuti sedere anche gli
The
altri.
simpler sinners, on the other hand, sit at the table with him. The others could have sat down too, but they didn't,
Così giusti.
because they considered themselves righteous.
Adesso mi sto sotto.
So the moment I consider myself so righteous, elevated, spiritual, I am withdrawing from happiness,
Ma qua-
from the banquet where we find God in ourselves.
E per ultimo, cari
How
amici,
powerful is this?
vi faccio vedere questo insegnamento potentissimo.
And lastly, dear friends, it might seem exaggerated, I will show you this very powerful
Usiamo
teaching.
le parole di Gesù come una via diretta a scoprire il sé,
I desire mercy, not sacrifice.
i pensieri, emozioni.
If we use the words of Jesus as a direct way to discover the self,
Io voglio
to
farvi
discover the God in us beyond thoughts, emotions, beliefs, philosophies, techniques, etc., I want you to understand something. A lot of people in that period, but also in the era of the Buddha, 2400 years ago in India, sacrificed animals, or in some cases, in some parts of the world, people, think of the Aztec, the Maya, etc., or a side of themselves with the idea that God wants a sacrifice.
seria, incapace di ridere, di tante
This led to spiritual people
nuova coscienza
who were boring, serious, unable to laugh and dance. In the new consciousness, spiritual people simply are the happiest ones.
la cenere in
But in the old consciousness, spiritual people were often those who wore sackcloth and ashes, who were serious, tense.
Misericordia
There are many dogs here. They are dear friends and very welcome.
termini orientali.
I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Now I will speak of these in Oriental terms.
Karma.
Who are those who are sacrificing themselves? For example, there are those who believe so much in karma and don't realize that while they try to burn some karma, they are already creating more.
Ha a che fare con le persone che
The sacrum facere, sacred doing,
purificare continuamente
has to do with people who live while trying to continuously purify the person.
bruciare un karma ne
While they purify it, they are polluting themselves with other things. While they try to burn off karma, they are already generating more. The direct path does not purify karma. It makes us discover that part of us that is already free from karma. And this, dear friends, is mercy.
Che cos'è la misericordia se
Now, if we take this part of the Gospel and see it as all sides of us, what is mercy but to accept those sinner little selves as they are?
un sacrificio? Qua Gesù è profondamente
I
dirompente.
desire mercy, not sacrifice. Here, Jesus is deeply disruptive with the Old Testament, where there is a God who wants many sacrifices and repentance instead. Mercy. But mercy for whom? When we read the Gospel tract, we understand that those are sinners sitting at the table. But we could also consider them as the greatest sinners, those who feel right. And we could still think of them as something even farther, of the Pharisees who feel so spiritual, and those who are even more aware of being small and miserable. They are all deeply welcome at the table with Jesus. I remind you that Christmas dinner and Christmas Eve lunch have their roots in these words, even if we have forgotten it. That is, to be sitting at the table at God's banquet. We have forgotten this. This means celebrating an extraordinary being and being worthy to feed on the higher things in life. As hardly anyone who has a big dinner at Christmas actually feels, and I say it with love. Instead, think about sitting at the table with relatives while holding your heart to the fact that it is a question of feeling truly worthy of being nourished with the highest things, even if we still have jealousy, envy, and attachments, because I desire mercy, not sacrifice, to purify all those little egos, those sides of me, a mercy that illuminates all those sides as they are and deems them worthy to feel at the banquet with the Supreme.
Cari amici, è possibile che io non mi reputi degno di sedermi al banchetto con le cose più alte?
Dear friends, is it possible that I do not consider myself worthy to sit at the banquet with the highest things in life, and subconsciously consider myself worthy only of the lowest, most miserable things? And it is me who considers myself so unworthy, who sees others as unworthy? Not that this aspect of me does not seize the presence of the Supreme, the presence of the Most High, in the Gospel symbolized by Jesus, but he only seizes the presence of those who are around him and shouldn't have been there. The Pharisees do not notice the presence of the Christus, they only notice the presence of the miserable little ones, as if their attention, their pain body were all in that, in judging them, which is an aspect of judging myself that I didn't let go.
Cari amici, cosa vi fanno girare dentro?
I desire mercy, not sacrifice.
Vi ricordo ancora che
Dear friends, what do these words make run wild within you? I remind you again that that banquet is the symbol of the banquet that many of us will have at Christmas. By eating good things, please, let's make it vibrate inside. We can make this become something that opens us the doors of the transcendent, and not just something done once a year with our relatives, where maybe I love someone or I don't even care much about someone else and it ends all there. Well, now we have a few minutes break, after which we will invite you to a Christmas meditation on the Gospel. If you want to make a donation that benefits the whole ScuolaNonScuola, even for a new light for lighting up the live broadcasts because we have lost the light, it is a symbol. We have lost the light. If you want to donate, find the details below the video. And I would like to remind you that many friends present here and others not physically present here at the end of January will guide a retreat at the same time in different parts of Italy: Venice, Naples, Florence, L'Aquila, Rome and Palermo, Como, Milan. They will guide a weekend of meditation and silent retreat for those who want to participate. You can also find further information on Instagram, Facebook and the social networks. I have to say that the ScuolaNonScuola has a scholarship which is for those who have real economic difficulties. And those who have financial difficulties in paying for these retreats are always welcome, supported by the scholarship funded by your donations and your participation in paid events that so many attend. Part of that money also goes to that scholarship that supports the others. So if any of you would like to participate but have real economic difficulties, please point it out to the aforementioned contacts and you will still be welcome. We now have a 2-minute break, After the break, we will invite you to have a
Allora,
blindfold.
cari amici, prima della
Drink a
meditazione,
glass of water, stand up for a moment.
lascio dire a Jack, intanto spiego.
Dear friends, before the meditation, a few more words that I let Jack say.
Amici cari, in questo incontro trovo curioso che abbiamo parlato
Dear friends,
di due banchetti
in this meeting, I find it curious that we talked
il
about two different
banchetto della
booths.
personalità e dei conticini, Piggio l'ha chiamato, dove
One is the
abbiamo
booth of
disposto
personality,
le cose e
and trivial itsy-bitsy accounts, as PG has called them,
lì. Siamo in
where we have arranged all our things and our gaze is focused there.
dinamiche. Beh, questo è un banchetto
We are hunched over this booth of our little objects, our little dynamics.
dopo possiamo sederci
Well, this is a booth we must rise from, we can rise from.
ma siamo eretti,
And immediately afterwards, we can sit down at another desk where, however, we are not hunched over, but we are upright, and we are having a banquet at dinner, at lunch, at breakfast, with all the parts of ourselves that we are welcoming,
che banchetto diverso.
with which we celebrate. There is still a desk, but what a different banquet on it.
Del banchetto nella
Bring this image of the banquet into the meditation ahead, dear friends. Thank you.